The sun was bright in the sky as little Prince Louis got out of the big black car. He was only 7 years old, and today was a very special day for him. For the first time ever, he would join his big brother Prince George and his big sister Princess Charlotte at a real royal event. It was a big fashion show to help a charity. Louis felt both excited and a bit scared. He held his mother's hand very tight as he looked at all the people. There were so many people with cameras. They all wanted to take pictures of the royal children. Louis was not used to this much attention. He wore a smart little blue suit that matched his bright blue eyes. His brown hair was neatly combed to the side, just like his father's. "Stand up straight, Louis," his mother said softly with a smile. "Remember what we practiced at home." Princess Charlotte, who was 10 years old, looked very pretty in her light blue dress. She had done this many times before. She knew just what to do. Charlotte gave her little brother a kind smile and moved closer to him. "It's easy," she whispered to Louis. "Just smile and wave at the people. Like this." She showed him a small wave and a nice smile. Prince George was the oldest at 12 years old. He stood tall and serious in his first grown-up suit. He wanted to look just like his father. George tried not to smile too much because he thought that was what big boys should do at royal events, but he did give Louis a quick wink when nobody was looking. The 3 royal children walked toward the big building where the fashion show would happen. People called out their names from behind the ropes that kept the crowd back. "Prince Louis. Look here. Charlotte. George. Over here." Louis wasn't sure what to do with all this noise. He tried to copy Charlotte's wave, but his was bigger and more excited. This made the crowd laugh and cheer even more. They thought he was very cute. Inside the building, Louis's eyes grew wide. Everything was so fancy. There were bright lights that sparkled like stars. Beautiful flowers were everywhere. Tall people in very nice clothes walked around with drinks and small foods on silver trays. "Wow," Louis said, forgetting to be quiet like he was told. "Is this place magic?" George tried to look serious, but he smiled at his little brother's wonder. "It's not magic, Louis. It's just a fashion show." "What's a fashion show?" Louis asked, looking confused. Charlotte explained in a kind voice. "It's where people walk on a long stage to show off new clothes. We sit and watch them. It's for the charity that helps sick children." Louis thought about this. "Will there be children like me there?" "No," his mother said as she joined them. "But by being here, we help those children get better. Your job today is to sit nicely and clap when everyone else claps. Can you do that?" Louis nodded seriously. He wanted to do a good job. This was his first time helping with royal duties, and he didn't want to let down his family. A tall man in a black suit came to lead them to their special seats at the front. As they walked through the crowd, people stopped talking to look at the 3 royal children. Louis noticed how everyone watched them. It made him stand up straighter, just like George. "Remember," Charlotte whispered one last time before they sat down. "Smile, wave, and be polite." Louis took a deep breath. He was nervous but excited. Today he would show everyone that even though he was the youngest, he could be a real prince too, just like George and Charlotte were a real prince and princess. The big lights dimmed, and the music started to play. The fashion show was about to begin, and Louis's first royal duty was officially starting. The music got louder as the fashion show began. Prince Louis sat between Charlotte and George in the front row. His short legs didn't reach the floor, so his feet swung back and forth. He tried to sit still like his brother and sister, but it was hard. The first model walked onto the long runway. She wore a bright red dress that flowed like water when she moved. Louis's mouth opened wide in surprise. He had never seen anyone walk like that before. The woman seemed to float rather than step. "Why is she walking funny?" Louis whispered to Charlotte. Charlotte put her finger to her lips. "Sha, that's how models walk. It's to show off the clothes better." Louis nodded and tried to understand. He watched as more models came out. They wore all kinds of clothes. fancy dresses, smart suits, and even some clothes that looked very strange to Louis. One man wore a coat that had lights on it. Louis thought that was the best one so far. "Look," Louis said too loudly, pointing at the man in the light-up coat. "He has stars on him." People sitting nearby turned to look at Louis with smiles on their faces. His mother gently took his pointing hand and placed it back on his lap. "Remember to use your quiet voice," she said softly. George sat very straight in his chair. He looked serious, like he was studying for a test. Sometimes he would lean over to explain things to Louis. "That's called a tuxedo," George said when a man in a black suit walked by. "I'll wear one when I'm older." As the show went on, Louis tried very hard to be good. But after 30 minutes of sitting still, he started to get restless. He squirmed in his seat and looked around at the crowd instead of at the models. "When will it be over?" he whispered to Charlotte. "Soon," she said. "Look, they're showing children's clothes now. These might be more fun for you to see." Just then, a little girl about Louis's age walked onto the runway. She wore a blue outfit that matched Louis's suit. The little girl looked nervous, but she walked bravely down the runway. Louis sat up straighter. He was very interested now. When the girl got to the end of the runway, she forgot what to do next. She stood there, looking scared. Without thinking, Louis gave her a big thumbs up and called out, "Good job." Everyone in the room turned to look at Louis. For a moment, it was very quiet. Then the little girl on the runway smiled and did a small curtsy toward Louis. The whole room filled with the sound of clapping and awes from the grown-ups. Louis's mother leaned forward with a worried look, but his father put a hand on her arm and smiled. Louis had not followed the rules exactly, but he had been kind, and that was more important. More children came out wearing different clothes. Louis clapped for each one. He was having a good time now. The other children on the runway seemed less nervous when they saw Louis smiling at them. "You're doing very well," Charlotte told Louis. "They like you." George nodded in agreement. Sometimes being a royal means knowing when to break the rules a little bit. Louis didn't fully understand what George meant, but he felt proud. He sat up as tall as he could, just like George, but kept his friendly smile, just like Charlotte. He was learning that being a royal wasn't just about following rules. It was also about being kind and making others feel good. When the children's part of the show ended, there was a short break. A woman brought small cups of juice for the royal children. "What happens next?" Louis asked, taking a sip of his apple juice. "Next is the most important part," Charlotte explained. "The clothes that the Queen's favorite designer made. We have to look extra interested in these ones." Louis nodded seriously. He was ready for the next part of the show. He wanted to make his family proud. And deep down, he was starting to enjoy his first royal duty more than he had expected. The second half of the fashion show began. The lights changed to a soft purple color. The music became slower and more fancy. Prince Louis finished his apple juice and sat up straight, ready to watch. "These are the Queen's favorite designer's clothes," Charlotte whispered to Louis. "Remember to look very interested." Louis nodded. He wanted to do this part right. When the first model came out in a beautiful purple dress with small sparkles, Louis's eyes grew wide. He really was interested now. The dress reminded him of the night sky with stars. "It's like space," he whispered to Charlotte. More models walked out in beautiful clothes. Some had flowers on them. Others had bright colors and gold threads. Louis watched each one carefully. He tried to be like George, who sat very still and looked serious. But Louis couldn't help but smile when he liked something. Then something unexpected happened. One of the models, a tall woman in high shoes, stepped wrong. She wobbled on the runway. For a second, it looked like she might fall. "Oh no," Louis said out loud. He covered his mouth with his hands. The model heard him. She looked right at Louis and managed to steady herself. She gave him a small smile and kept walking. Louis let out a big breath he didn't know he was holding. After the model finished her walk, she came back and did something surprising. She walked to the edge of the runway near Louis and gave him a little wink. Louis giggled. The people watching saw this, and many took pictures. They thought it was very sweet. When the fashion show was almost over, the man in charge came to the runway. He spoke into a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have some very special guests with us today. Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and for the first time at a public event, Prince Louis. Let's give them a warm welcome for supporting our charity." Everyone clapped and looked at the three royal children. George nodded politely. Charlotte gave a perfect little wave. Louis wasn't sure what to do. He looked at his brother and sister, then decided to copy both of them. He nodded like George, but then added a big wave like Charlotte. This made everyone laugh in a nice way. "They really like you," George told Louis quietly. Louis smiled. He felt proud, but also a bit shy with everyone looking at him. After the show ended, the three royal children were asked to come behind the stage. Their parents came too. There were many people there, models getting changed, people fixing clothes, and photographers taking pictures. "Now we meet some of the people from the show," Charlotte explained to Louis. "We say nice things about their work." Louis nodded. He had practiced saying thank you, and it was very nice at home. He hoped he would remember the right words. The first person they met was the designer. She was an older lady with white hair and glasses. She bent down to talk to Louis. "Did you enjoy the show, Your Royal Highness?" she asked him. Louis remembered his practice. "Yes, thank you. It was very nice," he said carefully. But then he couldn't help adding, "I like the space dress the best, and the man with lights." The designer laughed. "The space dress is one of my favorites too. And you know what? I think I could make a special suit with stars for a certain young prince if he would like one." Louis's eyes got very big. "Really? With real stars?" "Not real stars from the sky," the designer said with a smile, "but stars that shine just as bright." Louis looked at his mother for permission. She nodded with a smile. "Yes, please," Louis said politely. Photographers took pictures of this moment. Louis talking to the famous designer was going to be in newspapers tomorrow. Even though he was the youngest royal there, he was becoming the star of the event. After meeting the designer, Prince Louis and his siblings were taken to a big room behind the stage. The room was busy with people running around. Models were changing clothes. Makeup people were fixing makeup. It was all very exciting for Louis. "Now we meet the models," Charlotte told Louis. "We tell them they did a good job," George added, "and we take pictures with them for the charity." Louis nodded. He watched how George and Charlotte talked to the grown-ups. They stood straight. They smiled just the right amount. They shook hands in a special way. Louis tried to copy them, but his handshake was much more excited. The first model they met was the tall woman who had almost fallen. She smiled when she saw Louis. "Thank you for your concern, Prince Louis," she said. "Your gasp helped me keep my balance." Louis wasn't sure what concern meant, but he smiled anyway. "Why are your shoes so tall?" he asked, looking at her high heels. The adults laughed. His mother gave him a look that meant this wasn't a polite question, but the model didn't mind. "So I can be as tall as the clouds," she answered with a wink. "But between you and me, they hurt my feet." Louis thought about this. "Then why do you wear them?" "Louis," his mother said softly, "remember our talk about questions." But the model bent down to Louis's level. "It's a good question. Sometimes grown-ups do things that aren't comfortable because it's part of their job. Like how you have to wear a tie even though it's not as fun as a t-shirt." Louis touched his little blue tie. He didn't like it much. He nodded, understanding a little better now. Next, they met the child models. Louis was much more comfortable with them. There was the girl in the blue outfit who had been nervous. Her name was Emma, and she was just 6 years old. You did a good job, Louis told her, repeating what Charlotte had said to say. But then he added his own words. I was scared too when I came here. But it's not so bad. Emma smiled at him. Thank you, Prince Louis. I was very scared. But when you said good job to me, I felt brave. Louis felt proud that he had helped someone. He stood a little taller, just like George. Then it was time for pictures. The royal children had to stand with the models and the designer. A man with a big camera told them where to stand. Prince George in the middle, please. Princess Charlotte to the left, and Prince Louis to the right. Louis went where he was told. The photographer asked them to smile. George and Charlotte gave perfect royal smiles. Not too big, not too small. Louis tried to copy them, but he was too excited. His smile was huge and showed all his teeth. Perfect, said the photographer. Hold still, please. But holding still was hard for Louis. Just as the camera clicked, he saw a funny hat on a table nearby. He pointed at it and said, Look. The photographer sighed. Let's try again. Stand still, Prince Louis. Louis tried his best. He stood as still as a statue for 5 whole seconds. Then his nose started to itch. He tried not to scratch it. His face made a funny look as he tried to stay still with an itchy nose. Click. The camera took the picture right at that moment. Oh dear, the photographer said. One more try, please. Louis's father came over and whispered something in his ear. Louis listened carefully, then nodded. When he went back to his spot, he looked more serious. What did Dad tell you? Charlotte whispered. He said if I stand still for 3 good pictures, I can have ice cream after, Louis whispered back. This time, Louis stood perfectly still. He gave a nice smile. Not too big, not too small. Just right. The camera clicked 3 times. Excellent, the photographer said. Thank you, Your Royal Highnesses. Louis looked at his father, who gave him a thumbs up. Louis had done it. He had earned his ice cream, but more importantly, he had done a good job at his first royal duty. After the pictures, it was time for the most important part of the event. The royal children had to help give out special awards to the designers and models. This was a big job, and Louis was both excited and nervous. You will give this small box to the person I point to, his mother explained, handing Louis a tiny blue box with a ribbon. Then you say congratulations and shake their hand. Louis held the box carefully. It felt important in his small hands. He watched as George went first. His big brother walked up to a man, gave him a red box, and said some grown-up words that Louis couldn't hear. Everyone clapped. Then it was Charlotte's turn. She gave a green box to a lady and did a small curtsy. The lady seemed very happy. Everyone clapped again. Now it was Louis's turn. His mother pointed to the designer with white hair they had met earlier. Louis was supposed to walk to her by himself. The room was very quiet. Everyone was watching him. Louis took a deep breath and walked forward. He tried to walk like George, straight and proud. But the floor was slippery with his shiny shoes. Halfway to the designer, he started to slide a little. Whoops, he said out loud, making people laugh softly. The designer saw he was having trouble and walked to meet him halfway. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen, but it was kind of her. Louis reached up and gave her the blue box. Con. He tried to say the big word his mother had taught him. Congratulations, the designer said softly, helping him. Congratulations, Louis repeated with a big smile. Then he remembered he was supposed to shake her hand. But instead of doing a proper handshake like George, Louis gave her a high five. The crowd laughed and clapped loudly. Even Louis's parents were smiling. The designer seemed delighted and high-fived him back. Thank you, Prince Louis, she said. This is the best award I've ever received. Louis beamed with pride as he walked back to his family. His father patted his shoulder. His mother fixed his tie, which had gone crooked. George and Charlotte gave him thumbs-up signs when the grown-ups weren't looking. Next, all three royal children had to listen to speeches. This was the hardest part for Louis. He had to sit in a chair and be quiet while grown-ups talked into a microphone. The words they used were big and boring. Louis tried to sit still, but it was very difficult. He started counting things to stay busy. He counted the lights on the ceiling. He counted the buttons on his father's suit. He counted the flowers in a vase. When he ran out of things to count, he started to fidget. His legs swung back and forth. His fingers tapped on his chair. His mother gently put her hand on his to help him be still. Just when Louis thought he couldn't sit still for one more minute, something interesting happened. The designer who had received his award stood up to speak. She talked about her clothes and the charity. But then she said something that made everyone look at Louis. "Today I was inspired by our youngest royal guest," she said. "Prince Louis showed us that fashion should be fun and full of stars and lights. So I am pleased to announce that my next children's collection will be called Little Prince and will feature stars, space, and light-up details that even active young royals will enjoy wearing." People clapped and looked at Louis with smiles. Louis wasn't sure what was happening, but he knew it was good. The designer had made him part of her work. He sat up straight and proud in his chair. "You're famous now," Charlotte whispered to him. "Even more famous than before," George added. Louis didn't fully understand, but he liked that he had done something good. For the rest of the speeches, he sat still and tried to listen. When grown-ups talked about him, paying attention was much more interesting. After all the speeches were done, there was a special dinner. The royal family moved to a room with many round tables. Each table had pretty flowers and shiny plates. Louis had never been to a grown-up dinner like this before. He looked at all the forks and spoons next to his plate with wide eyes. "Which one do I use?" he whispered to Charlotte, who sat next to him. "Start from the outside and work your way in," she told him. "I'll show you." The first food that came was soup. Louis watched Charlotte pick up the outside spoon. He did the same. The soup was orange and smelled like carrots. Louis wasn't sure if he would like it, but he remembered his mother's words about being polite. He took a small sip from his spoon. "It's not bad," he said, sounding surprised. George, who sat across from them, smiled. "The food at these events is usually good," he said. "Wait until dessert. That's the best part." Louis perked up at the word dessert. He started eating his soup faster. "Slow down," Charlotte reminded him gently. "We have to make the dinner last through all 3 courses." Louis didn't know what courses meant, but he slowed down anyway. He looked around the room while he ate. At their table were some important-looking people who kept smiling at the royal children. A kind lady with gray hair asked Louis questions. "Is this your first royal event, Prince Louis?" she asked. Louis nodded, his mouth full of soup. He remembered not to talk until he swallowed. "Yes," he said after swallowing. "It's my first time." "You're doing wonderfully," the lady said. "Very natural." Louis wasn't sure what natural meant in this case, but he smiled anyway. "Thank you," he said, remembering his manners. When the soup was finished, people in black and white clothes took away their bowls. Then they brought new plates with chicken and vegetables. Louis was happy to see carrots and potatoes that he recognized. He picked up his fork, but noticed there were 2 forks to choose from. "Outside one first," Charlotte whispered, seeing his confusion. Louis nodded and took the right fork. He carefully cut a small piece of chicken and ate it. It tasted good with a sweet sauce on top. While they ate, a man at their table asked George questions about school and his hobbies. George answered in a grown-up way that impressed Louis. His big brother sounded almost like their father when he talked to these people. Then the same man asked Charlotte about her favorite subjects at school. Charlotte talked about how much she liked art and science. She used big words that Louis didn't know, but everyone at the table nodded like she was very smart. Louis worried that they might ask him hard questions next. He wasn't as good at talking as George and Charlotte. But instead, The man asked him something easy. "And what do you like to do for fun, Prince Louis?" Louis smiled, relieved. "I like to play football and draw pictures, and I like space and dinosaurs." The people at the table laughed in a nice way. They seemed to like his honest answer. "Football and dinosaurs," the man said. "Excellent choices for a young prince." Louis felt proud. He had answered a question at his first royal dinner. He sat up straighter in his chair and tried to eat his chicken in a neat way like George did. But cutting food was still hard for him. A piece of carrot flew off his plate and landed on the white tablecloth. Louis froze. He had made a mess. He looked at his mother with worried eyes, but she just calmly picked up the carrot and put it on the side of her own plate. No one else seemed to notice. Louis let out a breath of relief and kept eating, more carefully this time. The dinner was long, but Louis was doing his best to be good. He couldn't wait for dessert, and he kept looking at the door where the servers came from. Being royal meant a lot of waiting and being polite, but surely dessert would make it all worth it. Finally, after what seemed like forever to Louis, it was time for dessert. The servers brought out beautiful small cakes with fresh berries on top. Louis's eyes grew wide when he saw them. The cake had chocolate inside and white cream on top. It looked delicious. "Remember the small bites," Charlotte whispered to Louis as he picked up his dessert fork. Louis nodded and took a small bite of cake. It tasted even better than it looked. He wanted to eat it all at once, but remembered to take small, neat bites like his siblings did. While they ate dessert, a man with a camera walked around taking pictures of people at the tables. When the man came to their table, George and Charlotte sat up straight and gave perfect smiles. Louis tried to copy them, but he had just taken a bite of cake. His cheeks were full, and a tiny bit of chocolate was on his lip. "Prince Louis, could you smile for the camera?" the photographer asked. Louis tried to smile with his mouth closed. It made his face look funny. Everyone at the table laughed. Even the photographer chuckled. "Just be natural," his father said from the next table. Louis swallowed his cake and then gave a big, happy smile. The camera flashed, capturing his chocolate-smudged grin. Later, this picture would be in many newspapers, and people would call it the sweetest royal smile. After dessert, there was one more important part of the evening. The royal children needed to say goodbye to everyone and thank them for coming. This was called a receiving line. Louis had never done this before. "We stand here," George explained, showing Louis where to stand next to their parents. "People will walk by, and we shake their hands and say thank you for coming, or it was nice to meet you." It sounded simple enough. Louis practiced his handshake while they waited. The first few people came by and shook hands with his parents, then George, then Charlotte. When they got to Louis, he gave them his best handshake and said thank you, just like he had practiced. But after 20 people, Louis started to get tired. His arm felt heavy from so many handshakes. His feet hurt from standing in his new shoes. He tried not to show it, but he couldn't help yawning. "Are you tired, darling?" his mother asked quietly. Louis nodded. "How many more people?" he whispered. "Quite a few," his mother said. "But you're doing so well. Just a little longer." Louis tried to stand tall like George, but it was hard when he was so tired. Then he felt someone slip something into his pocket. It was Charlotte. She had secretly given him a small candy from the dessert table. "For energy," she whispered with a wink. Louis felt the candy in his pocket. He couldn't eat it now, but just knowing it was there made him feel better. His sister was helping him again. He stood up straighter and kept shaking hands. The next person in line was Emma, the little girl model. She was leaving with her parents. When she got to Louis, instead of shaking his hand, she gave him a small curtsy. "Thank you for making me feel brave, Prince Louis," she said. Louis didn't know what to do. This wasn't what they had practiced, but something inside him knew the right answer. He gave her a small bow back. "Thank you for being brave," he replied. Everyone watching said, "Aw." Even the grown-ups in suits who looked very serious smiled at this moment. Cameras flashed again, taking pictures of the two children saying goodbye. Louis suddenly didn't feel so tired anymore. He had made a new friend at his first royal duty, and he had helped her feel brave, just like Charlotte and George had helped him feel brave today. Being royal wasn't just about fancy clothes and good manners. It was also about being kind and helping others. With new energy, Louis kept shaking hands. He was going to finish his first royal duty strong, just like a true prince would. At last, the final guest had shaken their hands. The receiving line was over. Louis's small arm felt like it might fall off after all those handshakes. His cheeks hurt from smiling so much. But he had done it. He had made it through almost the whole event. "You did very well," his father said, placing a hand on Louis's shoulder. "I'm proud of you." Louis beamed with pride. Getting praise from his father meant a lot to him. George and Charlotte looked proud too. They had helped their little brother through his first royal duty. Now comes the fun part. Charlotte told Louis with a smile, "We get to go home." Louis couldn't wait to get back to the palace, take off his tight shoes, and eat the candy Charlotte had given him. But first, they had to walk out through the main entrance, where many people with cameras were waiting. This was called the exit photo opportunity, as George had explained earlier. "This is the last picture, so it needs to be good," George said to Louis as they prepared to leave. "Stand up straight and smile, but not too big." Louis nodded. He was getting better at knowing what kind of smile to use. Not his big, excited smile, but not his serious face either. Something in between. The royal family walked toward the exit. Louis was in the middle, between George and Charlotte. They held his hands to help him walk in a straight line. His legs were very tired now, and he was starting to drag his feet a little. "Almost there," Charlotte whispered to him. "You're doing great." As they approached the big glass doors, Louis could see many camera flashes outside. There were more people waiting than when they had arrived. News had spread about the little prince and his first public appearance. Just before they reached the doors, Louis remembered the candy in his pocket. He wanted to eat it now, but he knew he should wait until they were in the car. He put his hand in his pocket to make sure it was still there. But while he was checking his pocket, Louis wasn't looking where he was going. His foot caught on the edge of the fancy carpet. He started to trip forward. For a moment, everything seemed to happen in slow motion. Louis felt himself falling. He heard his mother gasp. The cameras were flashing outside. This was going to be bad. But then, quick as lightning, George grabbed Louis's arm and kept him from falling. At the same time, Charlotte stepped in front of him, blocking the view from the cameras outside. Together, they had saved their little brother from embarrassment. "Careful," George said softly, helping Louis stand up straight again. "Thanks," Louis whispered, feeling lucky to have such good siblings. No one outside had seen the near fall. When the royal children stepped through the doors a moment later, Louis was walking perfectly between his brother and sister. All three were smiling just the right amount as the cameras flashed. "Prince Louis, over here," the photographers called. "Look this way, your royal highnesses." Louis kept his smile steady, even though he was very tired now. He gave one small wave, just like Charlotte had taught him at the beginning of the day. The crowd loved it. More photos were taken. Then, finally, they reached the car. The driver opened the door, and the children climbed inside. Once the door closed, Louis let out a big sigh and slouched down in his seat. "Can I eat my candy now?" he asked. "Yes, you've earned it," his mother said with a smile. Louis took the small chocolate from his pocket and popped it into his mouth. It was the best candy he'd ever tasted because he had earned it by being a good prince. As the car pulled away, Louis looked out the window at all the people still taking pictures. He wondered if being royal would always be this hard. So many rules to remember, so many people watching. But then he thought about the good parts, helping Emma feel brave, inspiring the designer's new collection and working as a team with George and Charlotte. "Did I do okay?" he asked his siblings as the car turned onto the main road. George and Charlotte looked at each other, then back at Louis. "You didn't just do okay," George said. "You were a natural." "The best part of the whole show," Charlotte added. Louis smiled and leaned back in his seat. He was tired, but happy. His first royal duty was almost complete. Now there was just one more thing to look forward to. The car ride back to the palace was quiet. It had been a long day for everyone, especially little Prince Louis. The gentle movement of the car made his eyes feel heavy. Before long, his head was leaning against Charlotte's arm, and he was fast asleep. "Look," Charlotte whispered to George, pointing at their sleeping brother. George smiled. "He's worn out. Being royal is hard work when you're 7. Their parents looked back from the front seats and smiled at the sight of their youngest son sleeping peacefully after his big day. Louis's first royal duty had been a success, even with a few small slip-ups. In fact, those little mistakes had made him even more popular with the public. When they arrived at the palace, Louis was still asleep. His father gently picked him up and carried him inside. Louis stirred a little but didn't wake up. He was having a nice dream about stars and spacesuits. The next morning, Louis woke up in his own bed. For a moment, he wasn't sure if the fashion show had been real or just part of his dream. Then he saw his little blue suit hanging over a chair, and he remembered everything. Louis jumped out of bed and ran down to the breakfast room. His family was already there, eating toast and eggs. But there was something unusual on the table. Newspapers, lots of them. And they all had pictures on the front. "Good morning, star of the show," his mother said with a smile. Louis climbed onto his chair and looked at the newspapers. His eyes grew wide. There he was. His picture was on the front of every paper. Some showed him high-fiving the designer instead of shaking hands. Others showed his chocolate-smudged smile at dessert. One even showed him bowing to little Emma. "Everyone's talking about you," Charlotte said, buttering her toast. "You're the most popular royal this morning." Louis wasn't sure what to say. He had just been being himself. He hadn't tried to be in the newspapers. "Am I in trouble?" he asked in a small voice. His father laughed. "Not at all. You did wonderfully. Sometimes when royals are too perfect, people don't feel connected to them. Your natural behavior reminded everyone that even princes are real children." Louis didn't fully understand, but he was glad he wasn't in trouble. He started eating his breakfast, feeling happy but a bit shy about all the attention. Then a palace worker came in with a large package wrapped in shiny blue paper. "This just arrived for Prince Louis," she said. Everyone looked curious. Louis rarely got deliveries. His mother helped him open the big package. Inside was a small suit, just his size, but not an ordinary suit. This one was dark blue with tiny lights sewn into it that looked like stars. It came with a note. "For my smallest and most inspiring royal fan," Louis's mother read aloud. "Thank you for reminding us all that fashion should be fun. I hope you enjoy your very own spacesuit. With thanks, the designer." Louis's mouth fell open in surprise. She had made him a real spacesuit, just like she promised. And so quickly, too. "Can I try it on?" he asked excitedly. After breakfast, his mother said with a smile. While Louis ate, George explained that his picture would probably be in the papers for a few more days. "That's how it works when you're royal," he said. "People watch what we do." "But don't worry," Charlotte added. "Soon they'll be interested in something else. That's how it always goes." Louis nodded, eating his eggs. He wasn't sure if he liked being in the papers, but he did like his new spacesuit, and he had liked meeting people like Emma and the designer. Maybe being royal wasn't so hard after all. After breakfast, Louis tried on his new suit. The tiny lights twinkled when he moved, just like real stars. He felt like an astronaut prince. When he showed his siblings, they both clapped. "Very stylish," Charlotte said. "Very space-like," George added with a grin. Louis twirled around, watching the stars shimmer. His first royal duty had been a success, and he had even inspired a designer. Not bad for a 7-year-old prince. He couldn't wait for his next adventure with George and Charlotte, whatever it might be.